Chapter 651. Meeting again upon seeing Will Ossepton's warning, Klein's first found himself blessed with good luck.
Thankfully, I didn't court death and continue the exploration.
He didn't hesitate to heave a sigh of relief. Although he had seen the mural related to Ouroboros, as well as the terrifying monster Anderson, who mutated for some unknown reason, he didn't actually physically get himself into a dangerous situation.
I wonder if I'll randomly appear in a region in the next dream, or will it continue from before? If it's the latter, the best choice of action is to not disturb Anderson, so as to avoid agitating him. I'll just walk the same way back and leave that black cloister.
Klein retracted his gaze and continued reading. Apart from the dream, the other things aren't that troublesome. As long as you don't attempt to approach those ruins, directly look at the thing that flies in the sky at midday, or challenge the storms that give ample warning, then it wouldn't be a problem if you follow the safe sea routes that have been verified by others. As for mermaids, just keep cruising forward and you'll ultimately encounter them. This is because, at their levels, they will only live in relatively safer areas, and there aren't many such areas. Finally, I hope everything goes smoothly. Sincerely, your friend who might be often in deep sleep due to reaching a critical stage in his maturing development, Will Ossepton. The final sentence was long and somewhat awkward sounding, but Klein instantly understood what the snake of fate meant.
Before I'm born, don't disturb me unless it's something extremely important and critical. I'll try my best.
Klein replied inwardly without any assurance. If he successfully advanced, then it might not take long before he had to seek Will Ossepton's mail, help in finding the Sequence 4 potion formula for the seer pathway. Being more confident with finding mermaids, Klein immediately left the dream, wore his hat, and headed for the pirates' dining hall. Due to the dream's disturbance, most of the food had turned cold, but the pirates still had a great time eating. After all, no one died. Since no one died during this mystical encounter, they naturally felt great that they had something to brag about. Frank Lee held a plate and sat opposite Klein, asking warmly,
"Do you want a cup of milk?"
Recalling the conversation in the dream, Klein firmly shook his head with a deadpan expression. Inwardly, he was very worried that the milk on the ship were all Frank's experimental products. Frank didn't mind as he gulped a mouthful of milk.
"I remember telling you about those little things in the dream."
Yes.
Klein cut through a dragon bone fish that was cooked in sauce, and he stuffed it into his mouth. This kind of fish was well known for having few bones. Most of the time, it only had one main bone. In Backland, due to its various species, they were considered a mid to high-end delicacy. But east of the Ordevi Island, in the periphery of the safe sea routes, they could often be caught. Frank chuckled.
My description back then was a little inaccurate. Their true purpose was to successfully produce milk, even when they aren't in a state capable of lactation. Regardless of whether they are male or female, as long as they consume it, they will produce milk and return to normal once they aren't fed. This way, the milk cows don't have to suffer any torture. This way, it becomes fairer for men and women to bring up their children. It will be beneficial for women to head out for work.
Wait, why are you telling me this?
Klein nearly failed to maintain his persona as Gehrman Sparrow. At that instant, he felt that the nickname of Crazy shouldn't be Gehrman Sparrow's, but Frank Lee's.
He's actually someone who supports equality between men and women. However, his means are a little terrifying. That's right. The Church of Earth Mother is like the Church of the Goddess. They believe that women should have the same standing in society as men. However, they place more emphasis on reproduction, treating it as the holiest matter. Among the 7 churches, the Church of Storms and the Church of the God of Combat are most biased towards men. The Church of the Sun is next. As for the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, they are different from the other churches. They discriminate based on intelligence. The Church of Steam is neutral and has even worked with the Church of the Goddess to encourage women to head out for work due to the need for more labor in the development of industry.
Klein instantly had the differences between the 7 churches flash past his mind. He looked up and glanced at Frank Lee as though what he had just said was something trivial. This made Frank rather happy, as he couldn't help but drink a few more mouthfuls of milk. After the pirates finished their lunch in batches, Catalea pushed open the windows to the captain's cabin once again. Using magic, she amplified her voice.
There's an island 1.5 nautical miles ahead of us. We will dock there and wait for the storm to pass. In these waters, every time there's a switch from noon to nighttime, there's a possibility of a terrifying storm occurring. I cannot confirm when it will happen, but I believe it's safer for us to wait for it to pass before we continue our voyage.
She went into the details a lot more than in the past, as it wasn't a sudden occurrence and there was plenty of time. One of the things people at sea feared the most was a storm. Therefore, no one objected to it. They went according to Catalea's instructions. Under Navigator Odolov's male and Bosun Nina's female guidance, they nervously prepared to dock. And this made Klein confirm one of the matters that Willow Septon had mentioned.
Do not challenge any signs of a storm.
Before long, an island covered with gigantic trees appeared ahead of the future. The more than 100-meter-long sailboat adjusted its course and docked against the wind. More than half an hour passed as the sky suddenly dimmed. Lead-colored clouds surfaced one after another. They overlapped with one another as though they enveloped all the surrounding waters. Amidst a loud boom and blinding flashes of lightning, a hurricane from afar swept over. It was connected to the clouds at the top and to the sea at the bottom. It was more exaggerated than any legendary giant. It was like a gigantic coiling serpent in a bid to destroy the world. The terrifying hurricane brought with it waves that towered like mountains, lightning that branched out like trees, and didn't stop because of the incoming storm. It constantly struck the surface of the sea, splitting into tiny electric bolts that spread outwards. As the rain pattered down on the Future's deck, it made the pirates who had entered the cabin or gotten shelter feel like the apocalypse had arrived. Such a storm didn't last too long. The sea calmed down after about 15 minutes, and the hurricane dissipated. The midday sunlight reigned in the sky once again.
You can head on to the island for a while, but don't wander inside. You have to be within the range of the cannons.
Catalea gave the pirates a brief chance of reprieve. Klein kept in mind Willow Septon's warnings and had no desire to explore the island. After leaving the Future, he only walked about on the shore, taking in the feeling of having his feet on solid ground.
Beach, sunlight, trees. It feels like a vacation.
Klein thought in amusement when he suddenly noticed a rapidly moving black dot through the corner of his eye. It was rushing over from the boundary of a cliff. The black dot increased in size to reveal a human figure. Not far away, Catalea, who was on the sand, also noticed the abnormality. She half turned around and took off the heavy glasses on her nose bridge. The figure with emerald-colored eyes approached. He was wearing a white shirt, a black vest, and trousers. He was of medium build with his blonde hair, split 70-30.
Anderson, the unlucky Anderson.
Klein instantly recognized him. The person was none other than the terrifying Anderson in the dream world. It was the Anderson who said that his companions never returned after they proceeded to explore the hall, but had claimed to be a member of the exploration team. At that moment, Anderson raised his right hand. Without any hesitation, as Gairman Sparrow, Klein took out a charm and chanted a single word in ancient Hermes.
Storm.
The charm, made of tin, immediately turned sharp, resembling a thin blade. With the infusion of spirituality, the wind in mid-air reverberated. With a deadpan expression, Klein threw out the charm in his hand at Anderson. Sue! 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 Azure sharp blades shot at their target like a lined-up firing squad. Anderson was raising his right hand high with a smile and was about to say something when he heard a deep and mysterious incantation and the scalp-numbing sound of the wind. His gaze froze as he threw himself to the side and somersaulted multiple times in a pathetic manner, as if the area before him was scorching metal. Sue! 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 The wind blades struck the beach, slicing clear slits into the sand, but they were just short of hitting their target. As Anderson nimbly somersaulted to dodge, he shouted,
Stop! Stop! I come in peace. I mean no harm.
Admiral of Stars suddenly said a name as she raised her hand to stop Gehrman Sparrow, who had taken out a charm.
Anderson Hood.
She knows Anderson?
Klein didn't rashly chant the charm's incantation as he said in a deep voice.
He has already mutated. I saw him in the dream.
He wasn't surprised at meeting the unlucky Anderson. This was because the pirates were all in the same area during the dream. They were all very close to one another, which also meant that Anderson, who wasn't too far away, was also very close to the future. Anderson stood up, at a loss on whether to laugh or cry. He raised his hands like he was surrendering.
No, not at all. I recognize you. You asked me many questions. Back then, I wanted to pull a prank on you. Really, it was just a joke to enliven the mood. Don't you think that having the mood suddenly change into one of horror is an exhilarating experience? Of course, I'm referring to the target, and not myself. If I had participated in the exploration, how could I still be alive?
That is what I'm worried about.
Klein didn't believe his explanation. Anderson shrugged and said,
I was preparing to explain that the moment I said that. I was planning on telling you that I was joking and had planned to seek your help. I hoped that you could take me away. But at that moment, the dream ended. Damn it, I was really too unlucky.
It does comply with the traits of being unlucky.
Klein silently muttered. He planned on flipping a coin right there and then to test him with divination when he suddenly heard Admiral of Stars Catalea say,
Listen to what he has to say. He's very famous in the Fog Sea. He has the nickname Strongest Hunter.
Chapter 652, Mermaid Clues, Strongest Hunter. Klein was shocked by this nickname. After carefully recalling, he realized that the man didn't have a bounty on his head. That meant that Anderson Hood's description of himself in the dream world was real and reliable. He was more of a treasure hunter.
Unfortunately, Gehrman Sparrow hasn't killed any pirate admirals, otherwise I would be the strongest hunter.
Klein didn't let down his guard as he coldly looked at the man. As long as Anderson Hood showed any signs of abnormality, he would immediately throw the charm in his hand. After all, the activation incantation was all the same. At his sequence, he could do it simultaneously while injecting his spirituality. Upon hearing the Admiral of Stars' introduction, Anderson seriously shook his head.
No, I'm not the strongest hunter.
Klein sighed inwardly.
Oh, he's still rather humble.
Anderson chuckled and added,
Admiral of Stars, if you really insist, then it's best if you add the condition. Below that of a demigod. Yes, the strongest hunter below that of a demigod.
I take back what I just said.
The corners of Klein's mouth twitched indiscernibly. Seeing no response from the Admiral of Stars, Anderson naturally lowered his arms.
These waters are very dangerous, but it contains many treasures. In this regard, I believe the two of you are very aware. In the past, many adventurers, or more precisely treasure hunters, have entered these waters to seek our fortuitous encounters, but most of them didn't leave these waters alive. Hehe. I'm talking about most, so there are always some lucky ones who can obtain items and ingredients while successfully leaving. The treasure hunting team I was in was organized by 2 treasure hunters who are experienced in this area. They claim to be very aware of which ruins are not to be explored in the first half of the safe route and which ruins could be attempted. They also claim to know which methods should be used to hunt various kinds of monsters, as well as what methods should be used to avoid evil creatures who have lost control. I've always been curious about these waters, and was successfully convinced by them and joined the expedition.
Catalea looked at the figure opposite her with her black eyes that had a purple hue and asked.
And then?
Anderson sighed and said,
It was very smooth in the beginning, as smooth as it can be. We avoided danger and obtained many of the relics left behind by former explorers, and we also hunted some monsters and obtained several ingredients. Everything changed when we discovered a strange temple on a submerged island. There were many murals which remained intact. This gentleman has also seen it in the dream world.
He used his chin to gesture at Klein. Klein replied calmly.
That's not important.
Anderson shook his head and smiled bitterly.
One of the murals was very sinister. It described a pilgrimage proceeding forward amidst a parted sea. The leader of the pilgrimage is depicted as an angel, having long silver hair that reached his back. He had very mild facial features. I was the first to arrive in front of that mural. I reached out my right hand and habitually outlined the various lines in midair. It's true, I really didn't touch it. I was at least 5 centimeters away, but to my surprise, the angel in the mural suddenly opened his eyes.
Klein scoffed silently, without any sense of pity.
Your nickname as the strongest hunter must have been forced as a result of you attracting too many problems.
Silver-haired angel?
Anderson was just about to raise his hand to comb his hair when he discovered that the man wearing a round-neck shirt, a brown jacket, pantaloons with a dark-colored cap, was coldly staring at him. It appeared as though any abnormal action would result in the man attacking without hesitation.
Yes, but I'm not sure which angel it is. At the very least, he hasn't appeared in any of the portraits of the 7 churches. Of course, the mural artist might have casually added it, and it might not be real.
But at that moment, Klein was thinking about something else.
This fellow is very professional when it comes to art. At the very least, the typical person wouldn't be able to know of so many religious portraits.
Cattleya, who didn't receive an adequate answer, immediately turned her head towards Klein, her gaze filled with an inquisitive look. She had just heard from Anderson Hood that Gehrman Sparrow had seen the mural.
Perhaps this member of the organization that has been gifted by the Lord can recognize the angel.
Cattleya had an inexplicable feeling that Gehrman Sparrow might really know the answer. Considering how Ma'am Hermit would be able to obtain the answer at the next tarot club from a casual question, Klein didn't hesitate to simply say,
Tail Devourer Ouroboros.
Tail Devourer Ouroboros? That angel of fate? That king of angels?
Cattleya unknowingly pursed her lips as the purple hue in her eyes turned slightly more obvious. The last time she had heard this name was from the Tarot Club, thanks to Miss Justice, and that was her first time learning of the existence of the kings of angels. She never expected to obtain clues of them in the real world in just a few months.
Tail Devourer Ouroboros?
Anderson ruminated over the name in a daze. Klein didn't speak further, showing his disinterest in explaining. Seeing how the Admiral of Stars wasn't speaking a word, Anderson could only laugh and continue.
I thought I was hallucinating back then because the mural didn't show any abnormality after that. Following that, our team fractured into 2. Most of them were frightened by my account and believed that they shouldn't continue exploring the temple. The remaining third desired to obtain more treasure and began setting off deeper into the temple. We waited an entire day. Noon switched night a total of 3 times, but we didn't manage to see them return. We were all outstanding treasure hunters, so we knew that something must have gone wrong. After making some confirmations, we didn't dare stay any longer or wait. We immediately left the temple and got onto the ship to return the way we came. We had already received plenty, and we didn't wish to take any more risks.
Wait, none of you had the intention to save your companions? Yes, a treasure hunting team that is temporarily put together will only bother with themselves and the few friends they are familiar with when they encounter danger. According to my experience, those companions of yours that vanished might be eating the fingers of corpses.
Klein lampooned and didn't reprimand Anderson. Anderson sighed again and said,
After leaving that temple, I discovered that there was something abnormal about myself. On the one hand, I became very unlucky, with everything I do failing. Even when drinking light beer in silence, I'll realize that someone had used a beer barrel as a toilet and pissed in it. Well, that's not what I encountered. It was my companion. On the other hand, we obtained control of ourselves in our dreams. We were no longer in a reverie and knew something, but we had no means to take action. Therefore, a number of my companions, a third of the original number of people, ventured deep into the dream world. Heh. They never returned.
Katlia, who had been listening in silence, asked,
What about their bodies in the real world?
Anderson took an obvious deep breath and replied,
They mutated into monsters, killing quite a number of my remaining companions and sailors. We might have successfully killed those monsters, but due to the lack of sailors, as well as encountering a streak of bad luck, we failed to reach this island in time before the storm arrived. Therefore, our ship sank. Likewise for our loot. The rest of my companions either drowned, got struck by lightning, or got eaten by the underwater monsters. I didn't see all of it myself. As for me, I was relatively stronger and luckier than them. I was sent flying by the waves and successfully swam to the shore of this island and began attempting to create a canoe to leave this area. As you can see, even my final axe has shattered. It was also reflected in the dream.
Anderson's final sentences were directed at Klein.
They really are a treasure-hunting group plagued with bad luck.
Klein inwardly drew the crimson moon for him. He believed that Anderson's description was likely real. His experience didn't seem to be fabricated out of thin air. However, it was unknown if he was hiding something. Perhaps Anderson had really gone deep into the temple and eaten the fingers of the corpses before coming out, believing that he was fine. Perhaps he had already explored numerous places in the dream world and had been corrupted by some unknown creature in an inconspicuous manner. After Anderson Hood finished recounting his experience, he smiled at Catalia and the man who he didn't know the name of.
Do I have the honor of being a passenger on your future? I will pay for the fare.
He looked as if payment wasn't a problem at all. Katlia once again turned her head to the side towards Klein, as though asking if he would accept.
This is to say that you are leaning towards accepting his request? Aren't you going to do any tests? I have to go above the gray fog to divine before I can provide a clear answer. What gives you the confidence? A beyonder power obtained once a mystery prior reaches sequence 5?
Klein figured out a lot of information from Catalia's gaze. Just as he was hesitating, Anderson hurriedly said,
I'm very familiar with the route ahead. I can help you avoid the latent dangers on the safe sea route, and I can tell you which ruins aren't to be explored. I can also give you early notice to avoid the singing voices of the mermaids in time.
Klein's eyes nearly lit up as it took him a great deal of effort to maintain Gehrman Sparrow's image.
Singing voices of mermaids?
Upon saying that, Anderson suddenly realized something as he shut his mouth with a smile, without saying anything more.
Yes, a day's voyage from here, and I mean a day in terms of the world outside, we will circle around a ruin and turn.
Klein thought for a moment and took out a gold coin in front of Anderson as he silently chanted.
Anderson Hood is problematic.
Pause, he repeated 7 times and went through the standard process of divination, but he didn't hold any hopes for an answer. Guillaume, it was a test on Anderson. If Anderson really was problematic, he would definitely show signs of guilt. After all, he couldn't be certain of Gehrman Sparrow's divination standard, and was unable to determine if he could disrupt it successfully. Ding! The gold coin was flung into the air before landing. Klein glanced at it before putting it into his pocket.
No problem. I'll later make a confirmation by going above the gray fog.
Katlia looked at Anderson and nodded.
I agree to your request. However, after we leave these waters, you need to hand over half of what you have. If there's nothing, I'll not take anything either.
Anderson fell silent for a few seconds before smiling again.
Deal!
Having found a way out, he clearly relaxed as he smiled.
Also, I have to warn you that although my bad luck is limited to me alone, you should be careful because I might attract monsters. Of course, I believe that with you, this gentleman, and myself, we should be able to guarantee our safety.
Just as he said that, the entire island quaked. A smoky plume emanated out of the primitive forest.
Don't tell me a monster is really coming.
Anderson subconsciously turned agape. Chapter 653, Black-Faced, Black-Handed. The ground trembled slightly as a figure that was nearly 3 meters tall appeared at the boundary of the island's primitive forest. Its body was grayish-white in color, seemingly formed from boulders. Its face was potholed without any obvious eyes, nose, mouth, or ears.
Stone giant.
Catalea muttered the monster's type. Be it Klein or Anderson, both of them knew nothing about such monsters. However, they didn't cast an inquisitive look at Catalea. They focused on the monster, looking highly professional. Catalea turned her body to face the docked future. She raised her right hand halfway and amplified her voice.
Aim.
The pirates on duty immediately adjusted dozens of cannons on the port of the ship, aiming them right at the stone giant, which was lumbering over. Boom, boom, boom. Cannonballs flew out and landed around the stone giant, sending dust flying as the bombardment covered a huge area. The ground clearly quaked as flames surged. Splinters spewed everywhere as though everything could be destroyed. Tap, tap, tap! The tall, grayish-white figure tore out of the dust, having not suffered any serious damage. All it had were a few cracks on its surface, Catalea said without a perturbed expression.
This isn't a kind of giant, but a kind of stone golem. Its core is the main ingredient of Sequence 5 Guardian from the Guardian sequence pathway. Therefore, its defenses are extremely high.
Amidst the reverberating cannon bombardment, Klein nearly suspected if there was a problem with his auditory senses. He thought in puzzlement as he lampooned.
Since you know that the stone giant has high defense, why did you use a cannon bombardment? Isn't that a waste of cannonballs?
Perhaps hearing his inner thoughts, Catalea said as she watched the stone giant approach.
I've never encountered such a beyonder creature before, so I wish to do some tests.
I have nothing to say against such a reason.
Klein was rendered speechless. At this moment, Anderson Hood, who had been observing the stone giant the entire time, raised his hand and said,
Do you have anyone who has beyonder powers in the ice and frost domain?
Me.
Catalea coldly answered. Seeing how Ma'am Hermit had the means, Klein swallowed back the words he nearly said out loud. He really didn't wish to activate creeping hunger unless necessary, despite Zombie possessing the powers of ice and frost. He believed that he couldn't find any suitable food on the island. Catalea took out a grayish-black scroll from a secret pocket in her warlock robe and softly chanted a single word in ancient Hermes.
Freezing.
Silently, the scroll was consumed by icy blue flames, and immediately there were crystalline streams of light that appeared in midair. They flew towards the stone giant and froze the target within as icicles hung from it. Amidst jarring, cracking sounds, the ice layer cracked in turn as the stone giant slowly walked out of the zone. However, its grayish-white exterior had turned a darker shade. Its motions were a lot stiffer than before. Hype-be-hype-be-a. At this moment, Anderson raised his hands as though he was a conductor, gesturing for the audience to give their applause. Orange-yellow flames, which were almost white in color, sprouted at the stone giant's feet, as though it had stepped into a particular trap. Its surface rapidly produced a bout of steam as cracks spread across its body in the form of deep fractures. Anderson pulled back with his right arm as a burning white spear condensed in his palm. The flames at the tip of the spear condensed to a point as it emitted a blinding luster. The spear flew out, accurately hitting the crack in the stone giant's belly as the flames melted a huge hole in it. As for Anderson Hood, who was originally on the beach, he seemed to merge with the burning white spear. The flames brightened as he strangely appeared behind the stone giant. He held his left hand into a fist as his arm bulged. With an uppercut, he struck upwards from the hole and into the stone giant's heart. This simple-looking strike created an exaggerated effect. The stone giant immediately froze on the spot as cracking sounds constantly emitted from its interior. In seconds, it had crumbled into rubble.
A critical strike.
Klein's pupils constricted. Catalia calmly stood on the spot and said without any surprise,
Sequence 5 of the hunter pathway is Reaper. Furthermore, they are good at finding the weakness of their prey.
Reaper. A death reaper of life? No wonder.
Klein nodded slightly. At this moment, Anderson crouched down and rummaged through the stone giant's carcass. Then he turned his head and smiled ruefully.
It's not a real monster.
That meant that there weren't any spoils of war. While Anderson described the situation, the rubble vanished at a discernible pace. Klein couldn't help but lampoon inwardly.
For an unlucky fellow like you, don't be the one opening chests or looting corpses.
Anderson returned and kept droning on.
The greatest problem of these waters is this. Not every monster will provide you with riches.
This is because conjured monsters such as this are a part of more powerful monsters of a higher level. Of course, it's possible that they're the result of remnant powers and auras. Klein already had a preliminary theory towards this. Having gone through the voyage, he discovered that there were beyonder traces of Sun, Evernight, Storm, and the Spectator pathway. He had a more fleshed-out theory from his previous theories. He originally suspected that these waters were the remnants of a battlefield in a war between Second Epoch ancient gods. Storm belonged to Elf King Soniathrum. Spectator belonged to Dragon King Ancoelt. Evernight belonged to King of Demonic Wolves Phlegrea, with Little Sun providing him with the legendary records from the City of Silver at each gathering. Klein had gained a preliminary understanding of the authorities of the 8 ancient gods in the Second Epoch. However, the constant midday and the sun chariot formed from gold had made Klein have doubts about his theory. This was because none of the 8 ancient gods grasped the sun pathway. Soon, Klein connected it to Ammon's and Adam's father, the City of Silver creator, who was deemed as the ancient sun god. After this creator awakened, and after a series of intense battles, he had taken back the authorities of the ancient gods. Hence, these ruins of the battle between gods were left behind? The incomplete mural he saw at the elven ruin suddenly surfaced in Klein's mind. Elf King Soniathrum and the City of Silver's creator, who was also the ancient sun god, were at odds. As his thoughts wandered, Anderson had returned to his chuckling state. He looked at him and said,
How do I address you?
German Sparrow.
Klein simply gave his name. Anderson was first taken aback before recovering.
German Sparrow? I've heard of you. You're the adventurer who nearly successfully hunted Vice Admiral Ailment. You have the title of the craziest hunter. Last month, when the ship I was on board passed by the Rorstead Archipelago and Oravi Island, I had thoughts of getting to know you over drinks, but your whereabouts were unknown.
Last month? I was doing volunteer work at the hospital.
Klein nodded and said,
You know me now. Also, try your best not to say anything.
Anderson forced a smile.
I know, my bad luck tends to make the negative words I say become reality. All right, stop looking at me. I won't speak again. Put down that charm of yours.
Due to the appearance of the stone giant, the pirates, relaxation time was cut short. The future quickly set off once again, venturing deep into the sea. Along the way, Klein stayed standing on the deck and leaned against the side of the ship. He observed his surroundings while Anderson was loitering on the ship. He was good at socializing and interacting with the pirates.
Impressive. He easily got to know the situation of the ship.
Klein shot a glance at Anderson, who was drinking with a few pirates in the shadows, as he sighed inwardly. Klein held back his laughter as he thought mischievously.
Of course, the strongest hunter probably doesn't know that the alcohol he's drinking has a sedative of unknown origins.
With Anderson's help, the future circled around 2 hidden maelstroms and a floating palace ruin as it continued down the safe sea route. About 3 hours later, night fell again. Klein rapidly found his lucidity and reason in the dream as he opened his eyes and looked around. His vision was a swath of pitch blackness with nothing to be seen.
Don't tell me I'm blind.
Such a thought instinctively appeared in Klein's mind. Then, he reached his right palm into his pocket and took out a matchstick. This was a component that every magician needed for his spells. With familiarity, he took out a matchstick and ignited it. Immediately, a weak flame appeared in front of Klein's eyes. The flame struggled as it bloomed, slightly illuminating his surroundings. He was in a prison cell, one with an unlatched gate made up of metal railings.
Why would I be here? I'm neither beside Admiral of Stars or in the mural hall where Anderson was. I'm randomly placed in a particular area.
As his thoughts raced, Klein flicked his wrist and extinguished the matchstick that nearly burnt his fingers. A resplendent layer of sunlight bloomed on his left hand, as his eyes had two miniaturized suns. With the soul of the priest of light, he obtained night vision from the light of holiness. As he observed his surroundings, Klein saw that the cell he was in wasn't too cramped, but the floor was dirty and messy. There were many footprints, a mystery as to what previously happened.
Most of them are human footprints. A few of them are rather exaggerated, likely belonging to giants. The single bed is broken in the corner while there's a key beside the door. Someone succeeded in a jailbreak?
Klein came before the unlocked metal gate and carefully looked outside. The prison was filled with darkness. The darkness enveloped a stone-paved corridor, and across from him was a cold but solid wall. The path extended continuously on both sides, as though there were more prison cells. Klein retracted his gaze, picked up the key on the ground, and locked the gates. He didn't attempt to head out and continued staying in the cell. He clearly remembered that Will Ossepton had advised him not to explore the dream world. Therefore, he planned on awaiting the arrival of noon.
So what if it's a prison cell? It's not like I'm leaving.
Klein huddled in the corner, sitting on the halved single bed, seemingly blending with the rich darkness around him. In this extreme silence, Klein suddenly cocked his head, since he vaguely heard light footsteps. The sound of footsteps came from afar in an ethereal manner and at a slow frequency as it approached him. Chapter 654, Prisoner and Guard. No way.
I haven't gone anywhere. Has the far-reaching hands of trouble come on its own?
Klein revealed a grimace that didn't match Gehrman Sparrow's persona. He nearly drew a gasp. The only thing stopping him from doing that was because it would cause quite a stir, making trouble discover his hiding spot. No longer a green nighthawk, he rapidly made up his mind. He held his breath, slowly stood up, and moved to the side of the metal gate without a sound. He secretly and silently looked in the direction of the incoming footsteps. He believed that since hiding and avoiding it wasn't necessarily useful, he had to determine the danger revolving around the situation so as to make the best choice. The two miniature suns in his eyes dimmed as Klein waited for nearly a minute as he heard the footsteps turn heavier and clearer. Following that, he heard the clanking sound of a metallic gate slamming into the wall. Following that, he saw a towering figure appear on the right of the corridor. The figure was nearly 2.5 meters tall and wore black, full-body armor. The cold feeling it exuded seemed corporeal, like a gigantic knight. His aura was converged, and he was stayed like the deep sea. In the space where his eyes were, there were two deep red glows that flickered. In his hand was a long and broad black sword. Creak! He pushed open the metal gate to a cell and stepped in. He circled the cell, seemingly in search of something. Man.
Is he trying to find a particular prisoner? I'll definitely be discovered if this continues.
Klein hesitated for a moment and wondered if he should leave the cell and search for a way out before the figure came close, or to sneak an attack to finish the target in a clean swoop before continuing to huddle in a corner to await the end of the dream. After judging how much time he had left to think, Klein quickly took off the topaz pendant on his left wrist and began divining with a voice that perhaps only he could hear.
That knight from before is very strong.
After quickly repeating it 7 times, Klein opened his eyes to see the topaz pendant turning clockwise at a high frequency and large amplitudes. This meant that the target was an extremely dangerous existence. Without any hesitation or time to hesitate, Klein used the beyonder powers of a clown and controlled his muscles to pull open the metal gates without causing any additional stimulation. Then, he took the opportunity when the black armored entity entered another cell to gently walk out into the corridor and rapidly headed left with his body crouched. In the immense darkness, as he listened for any commotion behind him, he maintained his stealthy and swift motions, quickly making a bend and arriving at a metal gate which opened outwards. It looked like an exit. Attempting to push and pull, Klein discovered that the metal gates weren't heavy, but it had been locked. After 2 seconds of thought, he took out the key he picked up inside his cell, inserted it, and twisted it without holding out much hope. A light click of a latch opening sounded as the metal gates unlocked.
That works. Although it's a dream, you can't just have a randomly picked up key be an important item. I originally planned on folding some paper to insert into the keyhole and repeatedly slice at it, bit by bit.
Klein slowly pushed open the door as he lampooned while thinking in puzzlement. To his disappointment, what stood behind the metal gates wasn't the exit, but a hall filled with junk. Closing the gate behind him in passing, he locked it again and circled around the items randomly strewn around, in search of a possible door or path. A few seconds later, he noticed an inconspicuous black wooden door in a corner. Therefore, he carefully approached it and reached out for the handle. The scene inside naturally appeared in his mind. It was a storage room, and on the right was a full-body mirror, and to its right was a figure wearing a short linen robe.
There's someone there? The escaped prisoner?
Having been forced to leave his comfort zone, Klein decided to take hold of the initiative in a limited fashion. Therefore, he gently twisted the handle and pushed open the black wooden door. He wanted to gather information on the general situation so as to determine where to engage in combat or flee at the critical moment in time. The figure wearing a short linen robe hurriedly but softly asked. Its voice was filled with despair and pain.
"Who is it?"
An adventurer.
Klein succinctly answered. He had already used his night vision to discern the figure's looks. It was a man with a weathered face. He had wrinkles on his forehead and the corners of his eyes and mouth, but his hair was raven black and lustrous. There wasn't a single strand of gray hair. His short linen robe was ancient and simple. His expression was distorted due to the pain. His rarely seen pure black eyes were filled with unconcealed surprise and puzzlement.
"Adventurer? Why would you be here?"
Klein maintained a certain distance from the man who was difficult to discern whether he was considered young or old. He stood by the entrance and looked at him.
Before asking others, introducing yourself is a necessary form of politeness.
As a faceless, just the short act of sizing him up from before had made him grasp the man's features. Apart from the discordant hair and the wrinkles, he had an old, gruesome scar on his cheek. Kurze. The man was startled as he worriedly glanced at the hall.
"It's best you close the door. We cannot be caught by that devil, otherwise."
The muscles on his face clearly twitched as though he had recalled something nasty.
Devil?
Klein murmured and extended his hand back to close the black wooden door. The man heaved a sigh of relief and smiled wryly.
"I apologize. I was indeed impolite. My name is Leah Master, an ascetic of a religious organization."
A religious organization? From the looks of it, you aren't a devotee of any of the 7 deities.
Klein discovered a problem with his choice of words. If he was an ascetic of one of the 7 deities, he could have directly said it out loud. Even the high priest of the Church of Sun and the bishops of the Church of Storms wouldn't come to blows the moment they met in such a dangerous place, Leo Master said with a self-deprecating laugh.
"That's right. I worship the original creator. He is an omnipotent and omniscient existence, the source of everything great. He is the beginning and the end. He is the God of all gods."
This. Upon hearing how this person revered the original creator, Klein's first reaction was that it was the Twilight Hermit Order. However, there are also some smaller denominations in the northern and southern continents. There's quite a number of people who believe in the original creator. Klein deliberated as he asked,
What's the name of that religious organization? How did you end up here?
Leo Master hesitated for a moment before saying,
To the far east of the Sonia Sea is where my lord sleeps. His sacred mountain is hidden somewhere there. I led a pilgrimage here in an attempt to witness his miracles to redeem myself. Perhaps it's a necessary test. We were caught by that devil, and one by one we died. Later, I seized the opportunity to escape the cell and hid here, awaiting the devil's departure.
Klein thought for a moment before saying,
Do you know the name of that devil? What characteristics does he have?
He,
Leo Master shook his head, saying in a somewhat puzzled manner,
I do not know his exact name, but many pilgrims seem to know him. They call him the Saint of Darkness.
Saint of Darkness? A demigod? Is this Leo Master's dream, or is it the demigod's dream? From the outcome of my divination, it's likely the latter. Otherwise, it wouldn't be that dangerous.
Klein was about to continue asking which organization Leo Master was from and determine the beyonder powers of the Saint of Darkness when he suddenly noticed the full-body mirror opposite the ascetic through the corner of his eye. In mysticism, mirrors were passages that connected hidden and unknown worlds. It easily brought about terrifying accidents. Therefore, Klein, who was in a dangerous dream, carefully walked over and planned on using the powers of a priest of light to destroy the item. Leo Master seemed to sense Klein's intention as he cried out softly in horror,
No, don't. Without it, I will immediately die.
Ah! Klein looked at the mirror again in puzzlement. Although the environment was abnormally dark, the mirror clearly reflected two figures. One of them was Leo Master, with his numerous wrinkles and raven black hair. The other was the thin-faced, black-haired and brown-eyed Gearman Sparrow, who wore a cap. At this moment, the Gearman Sparrow in the mirror slowly moved his head, even though Klein didn't make any movements. He revealed a deep, sinister smile towards him. The mirror's surface suddenly rippled as a hand reached out. With just the blinking of his eyes, the Gearman Sparrow, who looked identical to him, crawled out of the mirror. His face was tainted with an obvious sinisterness due to the darkness cloaking it.
How terrifying. Unfortunately, I don't look like Gearman Sparrow. Therefore, you failed to scare me. If Zhou Mingrui came out of the mirror, I might have been woken up out of fright.
Klein calmly looked at his counterpart and raised his left hand, which swirled with a layer of sunlight. The sinister Gearman Sparrow smiled as he raised his left hand as well, making a darkness that was made up of magnificence and sinisterness surface on his glove. This corresponded to the powers of a Baron of Corruption. Klein thought as he raised his right hand expressionlessly.
My clone?
From out of nowhere, he held a short milky white scepter in his palm, and at its tip were embedded blue gems. Sea God Scepter. Although his actions in a dream needed to abide by logic in order to achieve the desired effects, Klein suspected that the illusory world was unable to influence the mysterious space, or the gray fog. Therefore, he attempted to simplify the ritualistic process and told himself that the Sea God Scepter was stored in a similar unique zone in the spirit world. He could retrieve it whenever he wanted. Babat the outcome from his attempt delighted Klein. Indeed, the dream world was unable to differentiate between a unique zone in the spirit world and the space above the gray fog. With the premise of the Sea God Scepter belonging to him, this sealed artifact at the demigod level was retrieved.
It really works. Otherwise, I'd have to engage in an intense battle.
Klein secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He similarly believed that the mirror was unable to replicate matters related to the gray fog. The sinister Gearman Sparrow looked opposite him in a dazed state. He instinctively raised his hand, but his right palm was empty. Then he saw countless bolts of silver lightning shoot out, enveloping him inside, causing him to expend one paper figurine substitute after another without being able to escape from the area. With a sizzling sound, a huge ball of lightning illuminated the cramped room, which provided no room for dodging. Following that, the Gehrman sparrow from the mirror vanished. For some reason, Klein felt himself immediately turn serene, as though he had become a sage. He turned his head and looked at Leomaster again.
What's the name of the religious organization you joined?
Leomaster trembled as he answered.
Aurora Order.
Aurora Order?
Klein was stunned as he couldn't help but prick up his brows. At this moment, there was a loud clanking outside. The locked gates that opened outwards had seemed to have been kicked open. Thump, thump, thump. The heavy footsteps that sounded like drumming walked towards the corner, seemingly discovering where Klein and Leomaster were hiding. Klein suspected that the lightning storm from before had been sensed by the Saint of Darkness.
There's no way of hiding.
Klein held the sea god's scepter and kicked the black wooden door of the storage room open towards the Saint of Darkness. As the door tumbled, he clearly saw his target's appearance. The knight, who was wearing black full-body armor, had already raised up his visor at some point in time, revealing his deep, wrinkled face and some of his bright raven-black hair, as well as the old scar on his cheek. He looked identical to Leomaster. Even the minute features were identical. The only difference was the deep redness that emitted from his eyes. Chapter 655, Dream Analysis. Klein was alarmed. He instinctively turned his body to the side without exposing his back to Leomaster, who was trembling in horror in the storage room. He couldn't be certain that the prisoner wearing a short linen robe wasn't problematic. At this moment, the deep redness in the black-armored knight, who had the same face as Leomaster, brightened drastically. He raised up the gloomy broadsword in his hands. Bam! With a step forward, he cleaved forward at a speed that Klein couldn't capture with his naked eyes. At the same time, Klein, who was standing to the side of him, subconsciously raised the sea god's scepter and made the blue gems at its tip light up simultaneously. Whoosh! A corporeal hurricane appeared out of thin air as it swirled around Klein, protecting him within the eye of the hurricane. Whoosh! The black streams of light carved its way over as layer after layer of the strong winds dissipated, scattering in every direction, causing the entire hall to tremble. Boom! Under the black broadsword, the hurricane produced an explosive boom and was reduced to a surging wave that flooded the entire region. It lifted up all the junk into the air. The intense collision clearly shook the dream as Klein felt his mind go adrift. He couldn't help but roll twice. Plop! He fell from his bed to the floor, the fall causing him to open his eyes. Me too. Klein suddenly noticed a problem.
That Saint of Darkness is really powerful. Or should I say that I've never used the sea god scepter in the real world, so I'm unable to replicate its full might in the dream. Wait! It's still night.
At that moment, the midday sunlight wasn't beaming in from the windows. His awakening was due to the intense struggle in the dream, not due to a natural occurrence. That also meant that he needed to sleep immediately. Otherwise, he might very well disappear in the dark night, never to be found again. With that thought flashing in his mind, Klein pushed his right hand to the ground, flipping his body up as he flew towards his bed and laid himself down. Then he imagined the stacked spherical lights and quickly entered his dream. During this process, Klein swept his gaze to the window and vaguely saw the dark night outside. It was quiet and serene without any sense of sinisterness. Meanwhile, he vaguely felt that there was a fog encompassing the surface of the sea relatively far away. Amidst the fog, there was a cathedral composed of rather ancient architecture. It was completely black in color. There wasn't a bell tower, and at the top of it were pitch-black ravens spiraling around it as though they were consecrating or lamenting over something. This cathedral has many buildings around it. There are ordinary two-story residences and simple wooden huts. There are bread shops with hanging signboards and grayish-white mills using water wheels for power. Pedestrians pass through the main streets and alleys with their figures flitting about, impossible to know of their actual situations.
A mirage? The source of the danger at night? All the people who disappeared had lost their minds and went somewhere?
Klein woke up from his dreams because he subconsciously considered the questions that he had accumulated. Following that, he forcefully made himself concentrate. He retrieved the sea god's scepter from the spirit world's unique zone. He remembered that he was in an intense battle with the Saint of Darkness just before he left the dream. The slightly dim golden light shone into Klein's eyes as everything immediately turned bright. What he could see was no longer the tall knight dressed in black, full-bodied armor, nor was it Leomaster, who was dressed in a short linen robe. Instead, he was facing a floor-to-ceiling window that faced the setting sun. The window was very clean and revealed an indescribable sense of purity under the sun's illumination. By the side of the window were tables with their original wooden colors and black high-backed chairs. Further away were rows of bookshelves with all kinds of books placed on them.
A library? A book repository? Every time I enter this dream world, I'll be placed randomly in a certain area?
Klein carefully observed his surroundings and confirmed that it was temporarily safe without the so-called Saint of Darkness or strange evil creatures. He held the sea god's scepter and first came to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the environment outside. The first thing that he saw was the opulent buildings that covered the opposite mountain peak. The huge palaces, magnificent steeples, and the towering city walls that all appeared frozen in the sunset. It was a visual spectacle. Even though it wasn't his first time seeing it, Klein still held his breath, quietly admiring this miraculous scenery for a few seconds. He then moved his gaze away towards the cliff. He saw the high walls of the black cloister and the withered trees beside the boulders. But as they were blocked, it was impossible to confirm whether Catalia remained in her original spot.
Indeed, within a certain radius it's not possible to leave this region. I'm deep inside the black cloister?
Klein retracted his gaze in thought as he walked to the bookshelves. He temporarily didn't have the time to consider what happened between the Saint of Darkness and Leomaster in his previous dream. This was because he needed to determine his current situation. When he arrived by the bookshelves, Klein discovered that the books placed on them had their own names. They weren't blurry and indistinct like ordinary dreams.
The Spirituality of Life, Book of Charms, The Flower Within the Heart, The True Cosmos and Inner Universe. These are all books on mysticism.
Klein carefully reached out and took out the Book of Charms. He quickly flipped through it and realized that he knew most of the content, but there was a small portion which he had never come into contact with.
It can be confirmed that this isn't from my dream. Ma'am Hermits? The knowledge that pursues her and is injected into her has been conjured in this black cloister?
Klein had no desire to explore beyond where he was. He held the Book of Charms and returned to the side of the floor-to-ceiling window. He found a spot to sit down and began reading in a serious manner with the sunset's glow.
You can still study even in dreams.
As he lampooned, he took out a pen and paper as he wrote and drew. While he was engrossed in this, the light suddenly bloomed as blinding whiteness blanketed his vision. Klein naturally opened his eyes and felt warmth from the sunlight that shone inwards.
I just read a few pages and planned to speed-read it before using dream divination to recall them.
Klein sat up, frustrated. He felt like he had lost a good opportunity to study. This was because he couldn't determine if he would be randomly placed in the Black Cloister's library again. He straightened his hair, wore his cap, and went to the deck. As he observed his surroundings, he recalled the dream.
That prison is likely inside the black cloister as well. Yes, it might be underground. In other words, the Saint of Darkness and Leomaster are in a ruin nearby. It's no wonder that Willow Septon told me not to attempt exploring the dream. These places are really filled with danger. Why would the Saint of Darkness and Leomaster look identical? That dream was a little strange. Also, that full-body mirror was very magical and sinister. It actually managed to clone a German sparrow.
Upon recalling this, Klein began to find examples from his past experiences to confirm his through processes by comparison. This was called relying on experience. Soon he thought of something. He had once borrowed the mental terror candle in Backland and helped Father Yutrovsky eliminate the past him, a character that was dissociated from his original self.
Could it be that Leomaster is the Saint of Darkness from the Aurora Order? Due to certain reasons, he had split his personality, separating his good and evil sides? That sealed and dark prison is the reflection of his inner dream? Yes, that full-bodied mirror. Leomaster had said that if it were destroyed, he would vanish as well. When I looked into the mirror, the Gairman sparrow inside it did form a corporeal body. It was evil. It's no wonder I felt like a sage after I eliminated the Gairman sparrow in the mirror. It's because I got rid of my evil and sinister thoughts in my mind. Yes, that full-body mirror must be in the form of a mirror in the real world. These waters clearly have the beyonder remains of a visionary. It conjures many unreal and real monsters that can kill. And this belongs to the spectator pathway. Therefore, being able to split good from evil and causing dissociated personalities does make logical sense. Saint of Darkness Leomaster is a high-ranking member of the Aurora Order. He must originally be very evil, but that ruin or item stirred up his inverse side, which is the good hidden deep in his heart. It caused a split personality. Hence, he is trapped somewhere nearby.
Klein felt that he had roughly understood the truth to the matter, and felt a little regret.
Unfortunately, I'm unable to enter the same spot a second time. Otherwise, with the Sea God Scepter and Leomaster's good side, there's a high chance of defeating his evil side, the Saint of Darkness. And the damage dealt in the dream world would continue on in the real world. In that case, a good saint who understands the Aurora Order would be born. It will make it easier to strike down on this cultist organization.
Klein silently sighed and turned halfway around and watched Anderson Hood walk out of the cabin. The strongest hunter asked as though they were best buds,
Where did you go in the dream? I didn't actually find you.
Klein secretly frowned as he asked.
Why should I be seen by you?
Anderson was taken aback.
Shouldn't you return to the spot where you left the dream, upon returning there again?
Hawes.
There are other elements involved in my random appearance in other spots within a particular radius? Something to do with my uniqueness?
Klein realized that the problem was more complex than he had imagined. He said with some deliberation,
I went elsewhere after entering the dream.
Strange.
Anderson frowned as though he was very puzzled. Without waiting for Klein to speak, he thought before speaking again.
It's another strange incident.
Klein asked cooperatively.
What?
Anderson surveyed his surroundings.
Back when I was pretending to make a canoe in the hall last time, I heard the sounds of a door opening and of footsteps that came out from deep inside. But when I looked up, I found nothing. I originally thought that it was someone from the ship, but later it didn't seem like the case.